Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Welcome back to part 2 of planting my 3D printed bonsai pots. When we left off, I had picked this Ficus cutting of a cutting to pot into my new 3D printed pot here in the bonsai zone. It's been about 2.5 years since I repotted this Ficus, and I can tell it needs repotting again because look at the roots. When a ficus needs repotting, you can see the roots. It puts out a lot of aerial roots, and the roots start to curl around in the pot and just generally fill the pot up with a lot of roots. I've left the top of the tree to grow quite wild, so the first thing I'll do today is I'm going to prune the tree back and get it back in shape. My first task with this tree is to look at the tree and study it. So I'll just rotate it around. I've got quite a swelling in this area. I've got 1, 2, 3 branches coming out from almost the same spot on the trunk, so that may have to be corrected. I have this lower branch coming off the root base here that I have to decide if I'm going to keep it or not. Out back here, I don't know if this branch is new or it looks new, so that may have to be removed. I have a new root growing out the side of the trunk here, an aerial root that grows down into the soil and around the top of the soil here. So we may have to reposition that or remove it, one of the two. I've got a few weak branches up here that have died back. Some here. So, yeah, some of these stronger shoots are taking over and other areas of the tree are getting weak, so we'll have to prune away the vigorous branches and try and equalize the balance in the tree to keep its strength even all over. So I'll have lots of work to do on this tree. Here's where these 3 branches come out from almost one spot. You can see I've got the thick one there, an upright one here, and a horizontal one here. So these 2 are definitely coming from almost exactly the same spot. I wanted my structure to be more upright, so I'm going to keep this upright trunk and I'm going to remove this horizontal branch that grew out below it. So that'll be the first task. So here's that branch here. I'm going to come in and just prune it off flush. Like that. At the front of the tree here, I have my one trunk line coming up and some dead sections on it. So right here is dead. I can just pull that off. And this part of it doesn't look very good, so I'll prune that off right to here. And this part's doing all right, so we'll keep that. This one's taking a lot of vigor out of this upper part, so I'm going to prune that off shorter. So I'll go right into here. Take that off. I have to decide about this little shoot that's coming off the root base here, whether I want to keep it or not. If I take this branch off that's growing sort of out of the root base, I think the tree would start to look like every other ficus tree. The look I'm going for with this is I want it to look like there was 2 trees growing beside each other, and the one tree grew up tall and mighty, and the other one kind of got swallowed up in the root base of the main tree. This lowest branch does have some movement to it, but not a whole lot. So I'm going to prune it off probably right here. I think right here. So we'll get some branching coming from here. I'm going to prune all these long shoots now to get the tree back to a more compact size. I'll be using directional pruning to prune all my branches to flow nicely from the trunk out and up into the canopy. So here I go. I'll also try and keep as much ramification as I can. So I'll just start on the branches, pruning away. I had a look at the tree now. I think I've got to reduce some areas back further. I've got a lot of straight sections here, and there's some good leaves down lower, so I can prune it back a little harder. So I'll take this branch back to here, and I'll take my apex right back to here, and I'm going to take this branch off shorter too, to maybe about here. The pruning's done on the tree, so now it's time to repot. I'm going to try and reuse this surface moss, so I'll try and peel it off if I can. Seems to be coming off okay. I may not be able to get all of it off, but I'll do what I can. I'll loosen the tree up. I think there's a lot of roots growing in the bottom here. The tree feels really tight in the pot. It's coming slowly and surely. So I loosen up the edges like that. Well, let's try pulling. Here it comes now. There we go. Lots of roots, especially in the bottom. Maybe I wasn't watering the tree enough. When you get a lot of roots in the bottom like that, it shows there's not much moisture in the mid part of the soil. There's a good fine root system throughout the soil though, and just denser on the bottom. I'll get the roots raked out now so we can see what's going on and begin the root pruning. Hopefully we have lots of new roots in here to select from. Pick the best roots growing in the nicest directions. And I'm going to try and sort out this aerial root that's growing out the back, so it's not growing on a strange angle and circling around the pot. Yeah, I'd definitely say this tree was underwatered. I notice the soil in the middle is quite dry, so the roots have all been growing in the bottom of the pot where the moisture is. I'm just trying to get that aerial root untangled here. There we go. I'll get that positioned out back here. The root base may determine the front of this tree. I may change it slightly. Got some thick roots down below here. You can see that one really took off. Yeah, that root really curls around and goes underneath here, getting really thick. So does this root. That's a big thick one here too. I've got the roots in some water now, and I'm just washing off the remaining soil. I'm also raking to get rid of all the tangles in the roots. I'll get rid of the pot of water. Because the tree is going in such a shallow pot, it'll be important to get an absolutely flat root base on the bottom. I need to pick an imaginary line. That's my root plane. Everything above that plane will be above the soil, and everything below that plane will be below the soil. Everything below the soil will get pruned to a very shallow root system. My root plane will be somewhere around here. You can see I've made some cuts previously to the roots on the bottom. So I'll prune everything off to about that line, right across here. So here I go. This large one here will be pruned right to here. This other large one will be pruned right to here. The aerial root out the back, I'll try and direct it so it goes down into the root base. And it'll also need pruning, so I'm going to prune it off to here. For now, anyway. There's a few smaller roots here that I can prune back. Get rid of this ball of roots on the bottom. So it's getting better now. You can see it sits flat on the table. Looking down from the top, I'm going to rake out all the roots that I can in a radial pattern. That is our goal, to have all the roots to flow out from the trunk of the tree. Not to have them all tangled and a mess. Okay, I think that's as best I can get them combed for now. If you compare the size of the pot to the spread of the roots, you can see I have to do some pruning even to get it in the pot. So I'm going to trim around the edges of the roots to kind of balance them, so the longer ones will get pruned off harder and the shorter ones won't get touched at all. So it'll equalize the balance of the root system, or help to anyway. So that's a little better. You can see it. I might have to do a little more. Still a little big for the pot. That looks better now. Here's the pot with the tree, so you can see it's not a lot of room. I may have to trim the roots back even further. With the tree just roughly positioned in the pot, I can see a lot of work that I have to do to the roots. This root will have to fit into the soil, and I may prune it off. It kind of is probably a little high, and develop something down lower. This will stick out of the soil, and it'll kind of maybe spoil this flow line a bit. I'll have a look. If I can tuck it down into the soil, I will. I'm going to position the tree in the pot where I think it will finally be. I would like to bring it this side because I have this trunk line that'll eventually be a trunk that'll grow kind of off to the left side. So I want to get the balance of the tree to the right side here. So I may have to do a little more pruning on some of these roots. Yeah, I think I'll have to prune this one off a little more here. Allows me to get it over a little further. I'm going to prune this root off. I just don't like it sticking up there. I'll just prune it off roughly at first, and then come in and make it flush. Like that. Here's a view of the tree in the pot now. So I still have to do a little sorting of the roots and a bit more trimming, but it gives you an idea of what it'll look like. At the back here, I'll try and get this root, this aerial root, maybe down somewhere about there. So I'll have to trim a little more off it. Maybe to here. And kind of position it here, just so it straightens up. It's not very close to the trunk, but I'm sure it'll blend in someday. So I'm just going to do a little more root trimming, especially to the areas where the roots are a little close to the pot. Give them some room to grow. I'll do a final positioning of the tree in the pot, and then I'll start adding the soil. I played around with the tree a lot, positioning it in the pot, rotating it to get the best front of the tree. It's a little strange, this tree with its branches coming up here, but I think someday the design will look good. So I'm going to start filling it in with soil now. I have my one-piece screen fitted to the bottom of the pot. I'll add a thin layer of soil, and then I'll put the tree on top. I'll mound it up just a little higher in the center here. I'll wet this soil layer down before I place the tree on top. It just helps keep the soil in place while you're positioning the tree. Okay, next is the tree. Make sure all the roots are nicely combed out. I'm happy with this position, so I'll add my soil now. I think I'll get a spoon to do this. A spoon allows you to get the soil exactly where you want it. I think I have about 4 different size spoons in my toolbox. A little one for small trees and a bigger one for larger trees. Just holding the roots in position while I add the soil as much as I can to keep them going in a nice direction. You can also use your spoon for smoothing the soil out. Helps you see where you need more and maybe where you have too much soil. Next, I'm going to get my knitting needle and just work the soil into the roots the best I can to make sure there's no voids, so they all have contact with the soil. You can see the soil level sinking in some areas as I work it in. So I'll have to add more soil to some of the areas. It's time to give the tree a watering now. So I'm just going to start off by misting it, and then I'll adjust it to a little harder a spray. There we go. And give it a good watering. I'm going to add the moss to the base of the tree now. So I'll just put some in around here. Some back here. I won't have enough to cover the entire surface, but enough for it to look kind of decorative. This moss will spread really nicely indoors here because it's warm and humid and gets good light. So I'm going to wet the moss now. It was already damp, and I'm just going to give it a good soaking. And then I'll push it down to make good contact with the surface of the soil. I'm also going to place some sand on the surface of the soil where I don't have the moss, just to cover up that perlite, which never looks very good. I've got my sand layer applied to the surface of the soil, so I'll give it a spray with my sprayer just to settle all the sand in. Here's the final result of all the work repotting the tree. I'll show you a picture of the tree when I first started it, sort of its training as a bonsai in May of 2015. So this coming spring, this tree will be 3 years in training as a bonsai tree. Shown some progress, not a whole lot, but yeah, you can compare for yourself. After you've repotted your tropical trees, aftercare is very important, giving your tree high humidity, a nice bright light, and keeping it warm. I came across a product the other day from one of the greenhouses, and I thought this is ideal. If you don't have a greenhouse or a plant room, you can place this humidity greenhouse in your windowsill while your tree recovers. This little greenhouse comes with a sliding vent in the top of it, so you can open and close your vent and control the amount of humidity in your tiny greenhouse. To keep the humidity high inside here, I would get a bag of pea gravel and line the bottom of the greenhouse with your pea gravel, spread it out. With your pea gravel spread out, you can add a layer of water in the bottom. And then place your bonsai trees on top of the gravel. This will prevent them from getting waterlogged. They'll sit on top of the water layer. And when you put your lid on, your tree will recover really nicely in your very own mini greenhouse. This little mini greenhouse is very inexpensive. The lid cost me $10 and the tray cost me $3. So $13 for the whole greenhouse. I think it's a bargain if it makes your trees thrive. I'll put the little ficus cutting of a cutting back on the bench now and let it recover. In part 3 of this video, I'll be repotting my Ficus religiosa into this marble style tray pot. So before we go, let's go to today's updates. The first update for today is my Christmas cactus. It's looking really nice in bloom. Not every one of the branches is blooming, but you can see the beautiful flowers on it. At the base of the tree, I'm getting a lot of aerial roots growing out of the part that got eaten by the mouse. So I don't know what'll happen in that area. I'm hoping it rebuilds itself and looks more natural someday, but yeah, we'll just let it grow. I would highly recommend you grow your Christmas cactuses into a tree-like form. I think it just adds to the enjoyment to see all the nice cascading flowers up high rather than hanging over the edge of a pot. My next update is my aloe vera bonsai. I got an email from a viewer who wanted to see what I did with the stubs that were left over from the leaves after I cut them off. So I'll show you that now. I'm down low on the tree now, and I'm just going to grab some of the ends of the leaves with my tweezers and just give them a pull, and they come off. You'll start to see little branches forming on these trunks after a while. The trunk on this aloe is very tough. It's not going to flop over or break or anything. Yeah, it's really, really tough. Like, you know, I could break it if I wanted to, but it would be really hard to do. It's not going to blow over in the wind or anything. So that's my aloe vera bonsai today. My updates wouldn't be complete without a visit from the Royal Oak Bonsais. I've got the Royal Oaks out, and they're doing really well. They're growing nice and strong. You can see some of the locust trees have sprouted too, and they're growing up nice and tall also. Someone asked me in the comments, have I ever had an oak sprout and get like 3 trunks coming up? And I told them no, I hadn't. But then, a few days later, I noticed I was getting one like that. So right down here, you can see the main trunk of the oaks comes up, and it divides into 3 branches right away. What caused the seedling to grow like that was I had the seedling growing up and the shell of the acorn was sitting on top of the seedling. I think that caused it to grow 3 trunks. I went in and I picked the shell off the seedling, and they all started growing more vertical. So the Royals are all doing very well. That's it for today. This is the end of part 2. So stay tuned for part 3, where I'll be repotting more trees into my printed bonsai pots. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for watching here in the Bonsai Zone.